New economic policy, it is still relevant?
The New Economic Policy (NEP) was the policy introduced by Tun Abdul Razak, the second Prime Minister of Malaysia in 1970, after the country was shocked by the events of May 13, 1969. Who would have thought that the events of this civil unrest were a socio-political shock to the lives of the multinationals in our divided country, a profound socio-economic gap by the colonialists, without the overcoming of previous leaders. On the basis of the prosperity and peace that must be maintained, the government has taken prudent steps in distributing the country's wealth to all races, especially the Bumiputera who are left behind and enjoying their own prosperity through the NEP. The NEP is the first long-term plan framework covering the period 1970 to 1990 through the Second Malaysia Plan 1971 to 1975, the Third Malaysia Plan 1976 to 1980, the Fourth Malaysia Plan 1981 to 1985, and the Fifth Malaysia Plan 1986 to 1990. However, non-Bumiputeras are also denied their rights. In the implementation of the NEP, the concept of two-pronged eyes is very popular because there are two goals outlined in this policy of eradicating poverty and restructuring our society. Both of these goals have a common goal of integrating the Malaysian plural community. Recognizing the socio-economic imbalance, the government is working on a new approach to the country's development plan that includes a 20-year program called the New Economic Policy. NEP incorporates the two-pronged objective of eradicating poverty, irrespective of race, and restructuring Malaysia society to reduce and eventually eliminate the socio-economic imbalance. The original NEP was developed in a long-term perspective with targets to be achieved within the first 20 years. In 1990 the framework was reoriented into the National Development Policy (NDP) for the 1990s and presented in the perspective of Vision 2020, outlining the aim of Malaysia attaining developed nation status by the year 2020. Today, specifies of policy have changed over the decades. The core NEP objectives of national unity, growth and social equity have remained, although with shifting emphasis. In 2005, a new policy and implementation framework, the National Mission, was drawn up, outlining the approach to be taken to achieve Vision 2020. The National Mission is a framework aimed at obtaining greater impact and performance and identifies 5 key thrusts. First key thrusts is to move the economy up the value chain so as to sustain a growth rate of at least 6%. For Malaysia to be successful within today's increasingly competitive marketplace, moving out from its middle development stage towards a human capital-driven economy, this will require increasing the productivity, competitiveness and value added of established activities in agriculture, manufacturing and services sector. Generating new sources of wealth and upgrading employment opportunities in technology and knowledge-intensive sectors such as biotechnology and skills-based services. Giving a lead role to the private sector, enhancing small and medium enterprise development, increasing public-private partnership and attracting targeted high-quality foreign direct investment. Second key thrusts, is to raise the capacity for knowledge and innovation so as to reach specific targets set for educational improvements, for research and development, for the penetration rate of personal computers etc. Third key thrusts, is to address persistent socio-economic inequality through focused efforts on reaching the right target groups, and, by providing opportunities for employment and advancement. Here time-limited specific targets are set for poverty eradication, and, for reduction of disparities within and between ethnic groups, between rural and urban areas as well as between regions of the country. The employment structure and hierarchy in the economy is targeted to better reflect the full and fair participation of all groups in the population. In addition, targets are set for ethnic distribution of assets, both equity holdings and ownership in residential and commercial property. fourth key thrusts is to improve the standard and sustainability of quality of life by action on many fronts, from better management of natural resources to ensuring public safety and security, and to promotion of the rich Malaysia cultural heritage. Fifth key thrusts is to strengthen the implementation capacity by improving public service delivery, addressing actual and perceived corruption in both public and private sectors, enhancing corporate governance by strengthening the legal and regulatory frameworks, and also strengthening the roles of parliament, media and civil society. The relevance of the NEP type of policy for future economic policies of Malaysia. The Malaysian NEP story is depicted above of advance, towards the distribution objectives, and then retreat, or consolidation at halfway, and now renewed efforts to advance again holds lessons for the future. The importance of growth. Broad-based growth to ensure that disadvantaged groups can be more fully and effectively included as participants in the production process through employment, eventually at par with those already in places, and in ownership, management and control of enterprises is less firmly resisted in conditions of growth and expansion. Growth is a matter of increasing productivity. In given economic activities, it is also a matter of shifting employment from lower to higher productivity sectors and activities. In the evolution of the Malaysian economy in recent decades, both these growth factors have been operating. With education, training, and opportunity, large components of the labor force have moved to higher levels of productivity by both avenues. The NEP strategy, focusing on a more rapid, and continuing shift of Bumiputera into activities of high productivity, has led to high growth rates overall, even if the affirmative action to do so may have meant foreclosing, at least in the short run, some opportunities for more rapid advancement of the non-Bumiputera. Employment creation and poverty alleviation. The speed and pattern of growth in a largely traditional economy, as was Malaysia in 1970, need to be such as to increasingly include the underemployed and unemployed in the growth process, specifically creating opening for those wishing to move into the modern sector. Thus, economic growth has to be encouraged, and guided along an employment-intensive path. Largely through these approaches, Malaysia reduced its poverty rate from a high of 1 household in 2, in 1970 to less than 1 in 5 in 1990, with further significant improvement in subsequent years. Some of these efforts by government to improve quality and quantity of supply of manpower from the disempowered majority groups have been controversial and at times arguably misapplied. Yet they have been essential to the gradual improvement of the position of the Bumiputera in the pattern of employment in the private sector. Malaysia has succeeded in maintaining generally constructive interaction between the state and the private sector by adopting a proactive business policy and an open market regime. When it comes to the still unmet need for empowerment of the Bumiputera in the economy, the problem expresses itself most generally in the private sector. The government has at times made overtures to the private sector to overcome any built-in practice of discrimination against the Bumiputera, thus aiming to ensure that the private sector can become part of the solution, not only of the problem of ethnic imbalances in the market economy. The NEP was launched as part of an overall strategy of Tun Razak to reunite and rebuild the country after the traumatic experience of 1969. Besides its objective of creating prosperity for all Malaysians, so that no community would experience a sense of loss and deprivation, it equally stressed the important objective of uplifting the economic status of the Malays, in line with the spirit and intent of the social bargain, the federal constitution and the Rukun Negara. Malaysia enjoyed political and socio-economic stability since 1969, and to a degree the NEP contributed to this success. There has not been any racial riot since then. But we cannot rest on our laurels, while the pressure builds up beneath the ostensible happy, calm and smiling faces of the Malaysian society. Wide and rising economic imbalances persist today, as they did before the NEP era, and the division coincides with racial, cultural, linguistic, and religious divisions.